I was assaulted in 2019 by a man I had known 15 years. We were not romantic. And it turned into, litigation, and they'd countersued, trying to shut me up and shut me down. And I just got louder.
Do you find that people are good at self-identifying what they are? Like, are we honest to ourselves?
Paige Elizabeth cracked the code on helping women speak up. And let's just say, not everyone's a fan. Author of the book Leading an Intentional Life, coach to hundreds of women, and a level 5 yoga master. She's here today to use her voice, and if that offends you, she's okay with that.
And I said, if you think this is hostile, you should have been there the night your client beat me up. Leadership is a feminine default, and it's not something that we need permission for. It's something that we just need to show up and do. People are going to try to find a way, whether you use your voice or not, so you might as well use it.
Yeah.
And at least heal in the process. You don't need permission. We can have consequences or we can have results. Which one do you want? Do you want to be integrated and healed and authentic and showing up, or do you want to be sacrificing your voice and creating inner friction and setting yourself up for autoimmune disorders and still not getting what you want?
Yeah.
Like, which path? Yeah. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that by standing up for yourself that it's easy. But there's a reward. Well, there was a couple of moments in that deposition, and one of the things he said was, "Oh, you told the psychiatrist that you didn't like me, but before today, have we ever met? Did I do something to you?" And I said,
Hi there, and welcome to Roll with Steve. Before we get started, a quick favor. If you enjoyed these conversations, hit that subscribe button and join our community. I've got a bold goal to grow this channel to 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2025. And together, I know we can make that happen. So I appreciate your support. My commitment to you is to create new content weekly with talented guests that will help you grow personally and professionally. Also, drop a comment with your thoughts. I read every single one. If you find value here, a quick like or share helps others find the show. Thanks, and let's roll into today's episode.
The journey for men and women, I think, is so different in the challenges that they face. You've written a book called Leading an Intentional Life and have worked with hundreds of people and now are specifically have a message for women. But there's pressures that women face that you see. And I think you told me that there are patterns that you see most women falling into. I'm curious, what you see in your practice, what are those patterns that women are falling into that are keeping them from leading an intentional life? And I would also say the patterns and the pain points that you identify when you're working with people that are relatively the same.
Okay, so let me just preface by providing a little context, because I want to make sure that I am presenting my own history and how I arrived here appropriately. So I was raised by a pretty narcissistic mother, and I was the scapegoat. Scapegoats and truth tellers they have a different role that they play in the family. And my father was always extremely supportive, and so as a result, I didn't grow up with the idea that women weren't supported. So I just want to state that I had the understanding that we were, because my dad was my biggest cheerleader, right? So that's. I want to set the stage with that intentionally, because how I arrived to where I am today was not because I didn't have an incredible relationship with men. I actually did.
Could I ask you to kind of break down the narcissistic mother for someone that doesn't understand that term and what narcissism is? Can you help me define what that is?
This goes a little bit more into family dynamics and systems, but when you take a step back and you look at most family frameworks, especially in the dysfunctional sense, you're going to have one parent that is a little bit more controlling, one parent that's a little bit more enabling, and then you're also going to have the children, which you've got again, the scapegoat, that's me. So everything gets blamed on the scapegoat.
Okay.
It's your fault. If it's raining, it's your fault. If your political candidate lost, it's your fault. It doesn't matter what it is, it's your fault. The golden child can do no wrong.
Sure.
And then you have the more or less the other enablers in the family, right? And so with those two roles are kind of the big ones. My brother was the golden child. He died of a heroin overdose, so he was the baby, the only boy could do no wrong, but he had a great, like, he was an amazing baseball player, and that's a whole other thing. But a narcissistic parent will play into those roles very heavily, right? So, like, my mother, again, I was the scapegoat. My sisters learned to scapegoat me along with that and blame me for everything. If it wasn't for my dad, even though he was an enabler to a certain extent because he wanted to be a peacemaker,
Okay.
he did step in enough and set a boundary with my mother and basically say, hey, you know, you're not going to discipline her anymore. I was 12 at the time. And so he really did step in and protect me. A narcissistic parent is one who there's no reflection. It's all projection. So, like, none of their behavior is their problem or their fault. If they act out, it's, well, you made me. Well, you weren't acting appropriately, so of course I reacted that way. Like, there's never any accountability. So it's very fatiguing to be around someone like this because it's always going to be somebody else's fault, somebody else's problem.
How common is that for a parent to fall in that narcissistic sense with a child?
I don't know the statistics around it, but like the more people have the conversations, I would say it's pretty pervasive. There's, like I said, to call someone, label or diagnose someone as a narcissist is a thing in itself, and I'm not qualified to do that. However, to just say that on the spectrum of narcissism versus codependency, the enabler, it's very common. Because in order for the dynamic to function in its dysfunction, that's just kind of what you need.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so the narcissist can also be the addict, the drug user, the alcoholic. It's the parent who just isn't taking responsibility, is blaming, and people are tiptoeing around that person. So my mother was very covertly narcissistic. You know what I mean? Everyone thought she was so great until you were behind closed doors, and it was like, not so much. That's why they call it covert narcissists, because they're very, you know, sneaky in the way that they present their narcissism. So publicly, they look like a saint. You know, she was head of the PTA, always at all the events, charity work, all that stuff. But behind closed doors, it was another story.
So they can put on a show
100%.
when they're in public.
Oh my gosh. So yeah.
And they kind of snap back into those roles whenever they need to. You just mentioned codependence and enabler in the same, equating those two. Help me tie the knot on that to understand what is codependence. Is it the same thing as being an enabler? And define that for me as well.
So I would say enabling is more of a side effect of codependency, right? So codependence, you know, and I went to therapy years before narcissism was even a term. So it wasn't like the language I used. Codependency was, but I remember my therapist, who was just amazing, and she broke it down, and she said a codependent lives with essentially the motto, if you're okay, I'm okay. So these individuals, we will cater to environment, circumstances, and people to make sure that everything is okay, you're happy, right? You have what you need, you're good. Not because they're like, oh, I just want to see everybody happy, but because they don't want to be the target.
Sure.
So as long as everyone is good, they're not the target. So this is a dynamic that is cultivated because of, again, narcissistic parenting, addictive, you know, addictions or things like that. It's the tiptoe, eggshell. I don't want to ruffle feathers. I don't want to get slapped. So I'm just not going to say anything. I don't want to get in trouble. So I'm not going to point out what mommy's doing or what daddy's doing. You know, they lie low. They're incredibly good at being unseen, quiet, blending in. And this kind of behavior really sets the tone for adulthood and kind of how I ended up working with so many women who this is just who they are, right? Like, it's more pervasive among women than it is men. Not to say that men can't be codependent. My dad's a big codependent, but like, it's definitely more conditioned for women to be the glue, be the doormat, stay silent, don't speak up, don't challenge, don't confront. Like, this messaging, you know, is just more common.
Do you think that women think about that codependence and the role they've fallen into as what they're predisposed to be? Or do they see it as, I'm choosing to tiptoe around everyone?
Neither. When I work with these women, most of the time, they So the other thing about codependency is it's a system of being very chameleon-like. So their identity is based on what's around them. So they're not like, I like the color red and I like to eat, I don't know, meat. It's like, oh, you like the color blue and you want to eat fish? Yeah, me too. So when you're working with someone who has codependent tendencies, they really struggle with identity. So for them to even say, oh, I'm totally codependent, that would mean they're recognizing an aspect of their identity, which they struggle to do inherently.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when you see from personal experience, somebody maybe flip-flopping on something that would be rather extreme, like a political stance or religion, is it easy for us to pinpoint that person as a codependent if they're doing it in the context of who they're dating at that particular time?
I think I need a little more context.
I've seen a couple instances where friends of mine were dating a girl and she came into that relationship on one side of the political spectrum, but changed for him.
Yeah.
Like,
No, 100%.
we are
100%.
This.
100%.
That's codependence.
100%, because they're trying to just play it safe. And the thing is, they don't see it that way. They think this is just what you do. You know what I mean? Like, they think it's harmless, but ultimately they're harming themselves because they're completely sacrificing any internal regulation to have boundaries or like a structure by which they can live by their own values. They don't have that. They really lean into whatever is, and there's the spectrum, right? Like some people are like really just like gray. Like there's no way to even extract any sort of identity from them because they are just whoever and whatever's in front of them. And then some people are mildly codependent. Like they're more peacekeepers. You know what I mean? They're pretty good with boundaries, but they don't want to push back on a lot of stuff. So there's levels to it. You know what I mean? But yeah, if someone is really sacrificing their own system of like, this works for me or this doesn't, regardless of who's in front of them, like that is a red flag to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of that personally. And I wondered if it was just like, oh, I'm just making a choice to choose to be this today. Or like, is there any inherent belief in there? Because some of these issues are pretty diametrically opposed with each other.
It's based on security and safety.
Yeah.
Like 100% people are trying to, and this is where it's, you know, when I'm working with clients or even just talking to a friend, well, how could they do that? You know, because that's just their framework for security in that moment. Like people are always just trying to feel safe.
You mentioned to me that early in your journey, it wasn't really men who were coming out at your message. It was other women coming out at your message. Help me understand why you think that was.
You know, I think in the beginning, so as I'm 43 now, and as I've grown up, you know, it's like I had an ex-boyfriend who was actually narcissistic. I dated one narc in my life, but he did say something pretty profound to me, which made a lot of sense. Because I remember being pretty sad over the fact that like I just felt so much pushback in the yoga community, and the yoga community is 90% women. So of course it was easy to pinpoint where it was coming from.
Sure. And
he said, yeah, but you're not allowed to be beautiful, talented, and smart. Don't you know the rules? And so I was like, okay. And I think when I was younger, that was a lot of it.
Sure.
It was just, who does she think she is? And I was willing to go against the grain. So it's like, really, who does she think she is?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They were rooting for you to not be one of those things. Like you can't be the full package. Basically.
I think that was part of it. I don't know that was all of it, but I think that was part of it. And I do know fundamentally, anytime you go against the grain, people are going to hate you.
Yeah.
Like you're not allowed to live outside the rules. You're just not allowed, because if I can't, you can't.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect as well. But I think when I was younger, a lot of it had to do with just I was too much of all those things at once.
Sure. So you're taking a lot of hate from the female community at the time, and a lot of that has to do with the yoga community. And was it about the aspirations that you had that you were talking about, or specifically? I mean, we just watched the video of you excelling
I think
in
more
yoga.
accomplishments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why? I think I understand the whole idea of kind of being a hater, like you being good at something. I don't understand why that takes away from me. I can't just celebrate your success. Do you see this in your clients? Is it other people that are hating on them that you're working with? Like what's the bigger issue of the two, being the hater or being hated?
Well, I think that there is an issue with scarcity. Like people legitimately think there's only so much to go around. And once you understand that like support is an abundant thing, you're just like, well, whatever, you know what I mean? It doesn't take away from me because that is something that can be given in abundance. Again, I think it goes back to just their own childhood rearing and how did they get the attention they wanted or not?
Sure.
You know, again, I had this amazing father who was just like, you're just great. Go do your thing. I got your back. And I didn't grow up with like, oh, I need attention. Like,
Sure.
I had that support. And so I think that was part of it. I mean, I have a sister who just vehemently hates me and has that very attitude. And I recently reached out to her and I said, look, because she was trying to get in between myself and our father. And I was like, nothing that you do will change the fact that I'm Dad's favorite. Like,
how'd you like that? Okay.
It is what it is. Like, that's on him.
Yeah.
Like, I've been a rebel my whole life, and he just appreciates that about me. So nothing that you do is going to, affect that. But on the flip side, like, nothing that I do is going to change the fact that she's my mother's favorite. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. So
why do you think it is that it's sometimes the people that are closest to us that hate us the most? I mean, I've seen this, men and women, random strangers will root for your success, but the people that are closer to you, like your inner circle of friends, those are the ones who are hoping that you fail, especially when you try to bite off more than what they've accomplished or what they're going after.
Well, because it's a reflection on them. If there's no relationship to that individual, then it doesn't reflect on them. Like I can make a comparison between me and my sister really easily, and it's going to be a sharp one.
Yeah.
Right.
Raised in the same house, same upbringing, same finances.
Right. It's like, well, why did I turn out this way and you turned out that way?
Yeah.
And so there's the contrast is much, much more acute when it's within the family system. When it's a stranger, there's no way to make that comparison because we don't even know each other.
Yeah. Going back to the codependency, the black and white, the gray, do you find that people are good at self-identifying what they are? Like, are we honest to ourselves about what we are in that sense?
Oh, it depends on the person and just their level of consciousness, for sure. I mean, inherently, I couldn't give a yes or no to that because I've seen people who are just completely oblivious to all their blind spots and other people who are seeking them out. And willing to take ownership of those things. So
yeah,
I just really think it depends on the individual.
What do you find in the receptiveness of people to being coached? I mean, you're working with people that have come to you for help. They recognize that they have a problem, or do they recognize that life's not going the way I want it to go, and you have to identify these problems for them? I know every case is a case by case, but if you can generalize for me people who are looking for assistance, what's the generic profile there?
So I would say, based on my experience, the majority of the people that get in front of me, two things. First of all, if someone shows up and they want to work with me, it's because they've already let me know, I want to be like you. So I want what you have. I want your courage. I want your tenacity. I want your strength. Whatever that is, they know that I have it to give. So there's a humility with that coming in. And is there pushback at times? Absolutely. Because anytime you go up against like a subconscious holographic pattern in the body, in the mind, it's like there's this, and it's not even always a conscious thing. They'll react to you as though like you're taking away something that they feel is so protective. Like, I need that though. Like, how dare you challenge that? And I'm like, no. That thing that I'm challenging is the very thing that's keeping you stuck. Right. And so once we get around that piece, there's a lot of willingness. Right. But like, usually, and I tell them, I'm like, if you start pushing back on me, I know we've hit some good stuff. Like,
Sure.
like that is where we need to go. You know what I mean? If things are always easy breezy, then like we're not really working on anything. Like we need to find the resistance point.
Yeah.
So, and I would say most of my clients have been really good about that. I had one guy I was working with years ago, and he was asking for help, kind of, you know, on his himself, but specific to his business, and he was just chasing money. And I just said, you know, you gotta up your value, up your price, and stop working these hours. You're chasing money and you're not even present for your clients. And so he made these changes, and he went through a month where it was like nothing. It was like dry as a desert. And he fired me. He's like, I hate you. This is not working. This is whatever. And I was like, okay. You know, 3 months later comes back and he was like, you were right.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, okay, you know, so then we could maneuver from there. But yeah, so that's normal. You know what I mean? To get fired isn't normal. Like that's happened once to me. You know what I mean? But like, but typically that friction point, I'm seeking that out in them on purpose.
Yeah. One of the things that part of your message that sticks out to me the most is let's care less what other people think about us. Why does that have to be so pervasive in your content? Is that something that everyone is dealing with?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I feel like, I mean, even when I hear Brene Brown say, I struggle to look at the comment section, I don't. I don't struggle to look at the comment section, but I've also done a level of integrative work to where my filter for how I see reality isn't the same. Like when someone makes a nasty comment, I can go, okay, well, that's not about me. That's about them, because I've pulled in any parts of myself that I once rejected. So I can't be weaponized.
Sure.
So, but people who haven't done that work, if they haven't pulled in those parts of themselves, everything is on the table to be weaponized. So of course anyone's opinion is going to matter because they're not in their power. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I think there's a lot of instances where we almost care too much about others' opinions. And talk about social media and comment sections. Like, I don't even know these people. You know, you're not even in my circle. Like, why should your opinion even matter in the first place? But it does matter.
Well, and oftentimes I'll actually respond with, who are you?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Who are you?
Who are you and why should I care?
Yeah.
It brings up a broader point. Sometimes we get into this ideal of social norms that are in place, and other people's opinions have formulated what we should do, that you talk about rejecting some of that. I'll give you a great example of this. I was talking to someone last week about epidurals.
Okay.
As a guy, I don't understand if there's a pain-free option, why we wouldn't take the pain-free option. So let's start with that. My perspective is very much like, I don't want to be in pain.
Right.
But I hear from my wife and the moms groups on Facebook and the pressure of other women, most of which who had epidurals if they were available to them, pressuring mothers today not to get an epidural. Where do you fall, not specifically on that issue, but on the pressure of other people deciding what you do?
You have to live with your
kid.
choice, not them. You have to live with that choice. You know, it doesn't matter to me that people think I'm the one that has to wake up and look at myself in the mirror every day.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. It's like, well, you know, there's a lot of different topics where you could explore the pressures of society. There's so many of them. And just because that exists doesn't make it appropriate.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. Deciphering through what's a social norm because it needs to be a social norm. What's a social norm because that's just the way people have done it. What gets me is the people that I perceive, and I'm just making up generalizations here. You get a mob of people that either had an epidural, telling someone else that they shouldn't do it, or, your body was made for this, and the impact it could have on your baby down the road. And I struggle with that because like, what gives them a right to even have an opinion on the topic? Like, they're not in your body.
Right. No, and that's
now.
the thing. Like it really boils down to like just a personal decision.
Yeah.
My mom had an epidural with me and nobody else, and it went sideways. So there's that. But
Yeah, sure.
if you really want to get deep on epidurals, I got a story there too.
Yeah. But why do we care so much? I say we. I've never had a baby and I don't intend to, but that pressure is real from other people.
Oh, just because you're just outsourcing the validation.
Interesting. Break that down for me. What does that mean to outsource validation?
So this is kind of a new way that I explain this because it's so pervasive. But the idea that like pleasing your spouse, pleasing your kids, pleasing your coworkers, pleasing your boss, pleasing society. Like I get into it with my dad because he's just like, I don't want people to think. Who are these people, Dad? Who?
Yes.
You're an 80-year-old man.
Uh-huh.
Whose opinion? Your friends are gone. You're the last one standing. Who are you? But to outsource your validation means that what you identify with and how you validate yourself is not as important as someone or something on the external. Could be anything.
Interesting.
But you've decided that's more important than you. And that's not in my world. I'm the most important. Right?
Yeah.
So and codependent people, when you put yourself first, they also tend to think that's so selfish. How could you do that? But
let's talk about the tools and tactics for people that realize that they've got issues that they need to heal from. You've got a saying that when women speak, they heal. Can you break that down for me?
So I have a program and there's it's multi-layered. There's the physical or the physiological body, right? And then there's the mindset or habits or both. And then we have the trauma component. So there's like those parts under the umbrella that we help women with. It just came to me one day when women speak, they heal. I, as an actual framework and as a tool, I've gotten like pushback before. Like, why would you bother saying anything to so-and-so? Right? Just that very like that's just a waste of time. Yes and no. Now, we can get into the aspect of, again, power struggle and outsourcing and looking for validation. But one of the main reasons that you speak isn't for the other person. It's because you've denied yourself the validation your whole life. Right? It's because the child inside you didn't get to talk back to mom or dad or whoever, right?
Sure.
It's because there's a part of you that didn't feel like she got to say what she needed to say. And so you don't say it because you want a certain response. You don't care about the response. You're saying it to integrate yourself, right? This is how I feel. I'm just going to use my voice and say this thing.
Sure.
And so you do it to validate you. And I have found that to be extremely healing. Again, because one of the tactics that people will use to try to shut someone down is, well, we don't want to hear it, or it's not necessary, or it's not going to change anything. If it changes you internally and it helps you become more authentic, it absolutely makes a difference. Right? Because I don't teach people how to manipulate their circumstances. I teach people self-mastery, which is the capacity to show up in any situation and stay in equilibrium, have a sense of internal peace, and feel integrated. Like, these are things I teach, right? And this will shift your reality on the outside by making those changes on the inside. Most frameworks are an outside-in approach.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to like peak performance or optimizing your workflow or whatever. It's very, not that there aren't aspects of mindset, but most of it is tactical, logistical. It's not like, how are you relating to yourself though? You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
And so the work that I teach is, how are you relating to you? Because that will absolutely affect how you show up and how things flow into and out of your world. Right?
So it starts internally. Is
Yes.
that me speaking to me internally and using my voice starting with like myself? Or is it an outward projection of using that voice?
It would depend on the situation.
Okay.
So it really depends on you, the message, and just if there's a sense inside that it does need to be brought, like so many women are so afraid to just even post on social media. And you'd be surprised how just posting something makes them go, oh my gosh. You know what I mean? Like that changes your brain chemistry.
Yeah.
So it's really powerful to show up, be present, be authentic, and go, I agree, or I don't agree, or that's not okay, or that is okay. It gives, again, validation to you. Not because you want anyone to agree with you or not agree with you. It's because you're honoring your voice.
Sure. And almost having an opinion and stating it and choosing to not. I think about my 2 young daughters when they're going to come up in this world. As a father, I don't want them to be voiceless or to be afraid to say what they think. But you've identified that with most women, that is a problem.
Yeah, and it creates a lot of internal friction, which leads to the erosion of their immune system, hormones, everything just falls apart, especially after a certain age, because the body can only maintain something for so long before it just starts to go haywire. So it does cause a lot of problems long term when they don't actually show up in their integrity. So we have the codependent patterning of someone who is a people pleaser and not actually identifying who they are. Because if they identify who they are, then that means they're now potentially separate from the other, and that's a scary thought. A lot of them also live in a space of confusion. I don't know, because if they did know, then there's a responsibility attached to the knowing.
So is that conscious then?
Not super conscious, no.
Okay.
But if you know someone who's like, oh, I don't know, you're just like, oh, okay. Yeah,
Yes.
You were taught not to use your voice.
Yes. Yes.
You were taught not to use your voice.
But you can be taught to use it. And that's your main objective when you're working with women?
Years ago, I had a friend. So I had hosted a retreat in Thailand, and we were really trying to break through. She came. She was in a yogi, but she's like, I'm coming on your retreat. I'm like, okay. And she was trying to break free from some of her own codependency, because 45 to 60 is the age where women can't hold it together anymore. Like, there's statistics around codependency kind of breakdowns. Like they struggle around that age. And, Regina was at that point, and so I'm trying to like give her permission to be super vocal with me. Like, this is a safe space to say what you need. And I remember one day I was like, so do you want to da-da-da-da? She goes, girl, I ain't got time for that shit. And I was like,
well done.
I applauded her. I was like, yes, that was awesome.
I love, so there's almost like this feeling of the obstinance, and maybe that's the wrong word to use, but just tell me what you really think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, you could say that to a lot of people of tell me what you really think, and not just kind of going along with it and doing what's expected of you.
And if you say that to them, they don't know what they think.
Huh.
So it's a really layered process of getting to the core of like, who are you?
Sure.
Right? Like who are you? What do you identify with or not? Like creating this individual. And then from there, the boundaries, the voice, pulling back the need for validation and disrupting power struggle altogether and all that, those components. And then a huge part of my work is just the self-love practice. In fact, in my book, that was my favorite chapter to write, was Stop Fixing, Start Loving.
Yeah. Starting with identity first. I want to get to self-love. How do we identify who we really are? Like what tactics do we use to identify that for someone who's like, I don't really know what I want. I don't really know who I am.
Sometimes you have to start with the I don't wants and work your way backwards. Those seem to be easier for people.
That makes sense.
And then, of course, again, the reason that they don't know is because they've never given themselves permission. So codependents don't feel like they have the right to take up space, to express their opinions, to really assert themselves. They find themselves in these power struggles where they're trying to please certain people and they're wondering why they're not getting ahead.
Yeah.
It's this awful pattern of like, but I'm doing everything right. I'm not getting the attention. I'm not getting the promotion. I'm not getting whatever. And like, I had this conversation with my buddy yesterday because he's trying to end a really bad karmic relationship. And he's just like, yeah, I had some withdrawals. I'm like, well, I'm glad you called me.
Yeah.
You know? And then, because we have this thing about blaming the other person, like it's their fault that I'm here. And I said, no, sir, like she's here because of where you're at.
Yeah.
Like she's a mirror to your internal power struggle. You're looking for her to satisfy a certain need, which she will never, ever do. That's the point. That's why she showed up.
Yeah.
To show you, I'm never going to give you that thing because you are supposed to give it to yourself.
My favorite part about your book, I think I've heard this before, but you stated it so well. We don't get what we want. We get who we are.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty powerful. And
Yeah.
it hurts a little bit to think about that.
Yeah.
Because we want to offload that responsibility to somebody else to be something for us that we're supposed to be for ourselves.
Well, I think I used the example of maybe a martyr who was always like overgiving, but then wondered why no one appreciated her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
That's so interesting.
yeah, karma is very much based on who you are, not what you do. People think it's all just about the actions that you take. It has more to do with intention than even action. It has to do with your state of being more than that.
Sure.
Because when you're looking at energy dynamics, you know, we look at the strongest footholds, right? Right. So if I get into a car accident because I just missed a sign or something, that was not intentional, right? So there's not a lot of gravity behind me hitting someone because, first of all, that's not who I am as someone who hits people with my car. But secondly, I didn't mean to, right? So people have this idea that like, oh, I did that, therefore I'm going to be punished. No, you'll be punished based on your own resistance and your own patterns, right? So like if I am someone who seeks out revenge, if I am someone who tries to get people back, I set myself up for a situation where I might be targeted.
Sure.
Does that make more sense?
Yeah, it does. I had a point of self-reflection reading your book, thinking about part of this identity in discovering who you are. When you talk about the responsibility, I guess, of owning up to who you truly are. We use these I am statements. Oh, I'm a hothead. I lose my cool a lot because I'm a hothead. Not because I have a problem, because I'm a hothead. I'm not predisposed to be a hothead.
Mm-hmm.
You call that out as a choice. Is part of this finding your identity process also taking that self-responsibility for, you know, I choose to get angry at people. I'm not an angry person. Is that a piece of it?
Yeah. So for example, like you could basically say, I am a hothead, and that be your defense mechanism. And that would be part of your identity, right? You're using that as like a weapon almost, right? What I try to teach people is we don't want to shame or do away with or create a defense mechanism. We want to diffuse the things that we don't like about ourselves by saying, you know what, I can be a hothead, but I'm fundamentally a good person and I'm lovable and all those things, right? So you're not rejecting or really like, oh, I love that part of myself so much that I'm going to use it against people.
Sure.
But you embrace it and accept it as part of you so that it can't be weaponized by others or you. Does that make sense?
It does, but easier said than done. And especially in practice, when you're coaching people, where do you find resistance and friction as people are going through that process?
The deeper we get with something that's been held in the body and the mind for a long time. So you have to understand so much of these patterns are traced back to childhood, to trauma, to safety. Like pretty much everything just goes back to like, why do you do that? Like to stay safe. Just trying to be safe. You know what I mean? Like that's people will yell at you and call you names. Why? To feel safe. People will run away. Why? To feel safe. Like any pattern you can pretty much just draw back to their childhood, and they were just trying to stay alive.
Yeah. And you see that going into business, relationships, personal, all of that.
Oh yeah.
It's people reaching for safety on that and not achieving their potential or living an intentional life because they're reaching for safety.
Yeah, and you can observe a pattern that you have, which gives yourself a choice, or you can just be the pattern.
Sure.
And then like Joe Dispenza says that then you're basically you're not the brain anymore, you're the body. Right. So you're just now acting out of habit as opposed to pausing and trying to reintegrate a new set of habits.
Yeah. So let's talk about self-love, but let's tie in this idea of habits. There are a contingent of people that lean on the just love yourself the way you are, no need to make any changes in your life, except what this life has given you, self-love across the board. Where do you fall on that? Because that's not your message.
No. In fact, that would be more self-indulgence. Right? I had a friend years ago, and she was like, yeah, we have this thing where we love our inner child. So we go and we'll go shopping or we'll eat bad food. And I'm like, so you indulge that child. There's no discipline around that child. You're just going to indulge it, right?
Yeah.
That to me is not self-love, right?
Yes.
That's not the same thing. Self-love for me in my framework is not rejecting parts of yourself that you would normally feel shame or guilt towards. So that they can't be weaponized.
Okay.
That's really the whole point of that. I make the distinction between you don't have to like an aspect of yourself to love an aspect of yourself. I don't like that I'm not as lean as I want to be in spite of all the effort I've put into the gym lately. I don't like that. But I still love my body and what it does for me and the fact that it shows up and it's strong and it's healthy, right? You see the distinction?
Yeah.
So one gives you permission to grow and still work on it, but you're not doing it from a place of self-hatred. Because we know that self-hatred, those patterns always shift back to sabotage, right? I'm sure you've met lots of successful people who are like, yeah, I did it and I fell, and I did it and I fell.
Yes.
So you want to break the pattern of sabotage by not using hate to drive your goals. And as a coach, it's like people are either running to or running from when I get in front of them. It's like, what are you running from? What are you running to? Where's the shame?
Sure. So it's more positive to be running towards something than running away from something. Am I understanding
Both
that right?
can be a little bit depending on the driver. Both can be. But it's just important to look at. Again, like if you're running towards something, it is definitely a little bit more holistic as opposed to running from something. But we still want to just dissect it and make sure that it's altruistic and not.
Well, let's break that down just so I want to make sure that I get this. Because if my slow brain gets it, then everyone's going to get it. So let's use the gym and weight as an example. If I'm running away from the 250-pound version of myself versus trying to get to the 185 version of myself, is it something that's moral that's in there? That one is better than the other for me to visualize what I don't want or to visualize what I do want?
Well, it's more about making sure that shame and hatred aren't the drivers, is all.
Okay.
That's all.
So don't hate the 250-pound version of myself.
Yes.
Because I'm still a human being.
Exactly.
I still have a purpose.
Right. He deserves to be loved.
Sure. Yes. But the aspiration of wanting to be 185, there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like I only break that down just for the audience to self-reflect. But obviously, we need things that we're working towards 100%.
Yeah. How common is it that clients you're working with that have recognized and raised their hand that says, I have a problem, that there's a lot of shame and guilt involved in what they're running from?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
So that's just pervasive in us as
I mean,
humans.
just, people don't like sitting in front of me unless they're really ready to do the work, because my ability to just read through the lines, because when I'm working with someone, I'm not even listening to what they're saying. I'm reading the tonality, the pauses, their eyes, their like what I'm hearing. Like I'm really reading so much, and then not because of a judgment. Like this is not a judgment. I do this because I'm trying to find the pattern. Where did this start? Why did this start? What's behind it? Right. So like I'm observing this person because I want to make sure that we get to the core of like why they're sitting in front of me.
Is it common that there's a disconnect between the words that are coming out of their mouth?
Always.
Really?
Oh my gosh, all the time. And this is why this is like, people go, oh, you talked to so-and-so, what'd they say? Doesn't matter. They always lie. It doesn't matter. People lie. People will constantly lie. And so, especially codependents, I love them, but they are trained to tell you what they think you want to hear.
That's so interesting. They don't feel like they're lying.
No, they don't, because they're conditioned.
Yeah.
And it's not a judgment. I love these people, but like,
Sure.
I just wish they would just like fight back, use their voice.
Yeah. Well, it's strange to come into a doctor. We'll go back to like the weight loss example and say to the doctor, okay, I'm 300 pounds today, and I really think I want to eat salads every day, and I want to start like exercising 10,000 steps and the rest of that. But if they don't mean that, I think the average doctor says, okay, you want to do that plan? Fantastic. Like, here you go, which is mostly unsustainable if you got to that weight in the first place. You're saying that the doctor needs to be looking at what's coming between the lines of what they're truly saying.
Well, because
are.
we want to stop the pattern. And a lot of people use resistance as a way to try to break a pattern. But resistance just breeds more friction and leads to more hatred and self-sabotage and those things, right? And I know because I was that person.
Yeah.
So you practice self-love. If I'm in a position where I'm like, I really just love myself, like, and someone comes at me and tries to do some harm, I'm gonna be much more reluctant to like engage with that because of how I feel about myself. So practicing from that position, we tend to dissolve the resistance, dissolve the shame, dissolve the hatred and those drivers, right? And I mean, we could do a whole talk on just even like how it affects your neurotransmitters and dopamine and like that part of it, and how addiction is the opposite of connection. And we can talk about that part, but like really it's understanding that when you're integrating those parts of yourself, the filter by which you deal with reality changes. So I'm not making choices. I'm not like, oh God, okay, I want to go on a diet, but geez, I'd really like a piece of cake. You know what I mean? It's not there. You're like, no, I want to go on a diet because I want to feel better.
Yes. That's a hard point to get to because the cake always sounds good, right? And that was true in a lot of areas in life that we're probably talking about addiction more so than just I have a food problem to go along with it. That's the camp that I probably fall into, if I'm being open and honest. Okay, so we self-identify, and then we learn to love ourselves or to not have this shame and guilt with who we are today, but we have these aspirations for the future to go after. What I love about your message in the book is that it's not enough just to say what you want. There has to be action tied to it. Is that news to most people? That there
in
needs
the
to be
new
action?
age community, yeah.
Okay, break that down for me.
I feel like I've had conversations with people who literally, if they could just sit on a lily pad and like will it to them, they would. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't work.
You break it down in the book. I'm going to butcher this. So I'll let you do it instead. But you talk about the different types of, we talk about saying what we want. And there's the idea in the book of saying what you want and expecting it to come tomorrow versus saying what you want and knowing that there's a process to go and get that actions that you have to take to do that. You can say that much better than I just broke it down, but.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of, first of all, most people don't know what they want. Like, we'll just break that right there. Most people do not know what they want. If you ask them, their answer would be, I don't know. So that's a problem. And then even if they do know what they want, there's not enough action around it. And if they take action, see what happens when we break a pattern is we're met with the adversary initially. So we all know that when we go on a diet, all of a sudden we're like, wow, my ability to smell pizza just kicked in from a mile away. Where did that come from? Right? Like, it's amazing how all of a sudden we get these superpowers, right? And it's because it's that resistance to changing that homeostasis in the body. So a lot of times people are like, okay, well, yeah, I'm going to go make a change. But then the universe or whatever comes out of them and is like, really, are you sure? And it just challenge after challenge after challenge. And so they mistake oftentimes the way for the outcome. And then they don't do the work. And then they just think, well, if I just will it to me, it'll happen. But like, we are essentially materializing to us what we're giving out at any given time. And so if you're not taking action, you're just manifesting stagnation.
Sure. Yeah. Manifesting was the word I was looking for there. Because it's one thing to manifest the thing that you want. You talk about it in a relationship sense in the book. For a lot of people, it's money that they're looking for. If I could achieve that, and they manifest, well, I would like to be a billionaire and manifest that. But there's actions associated with that coming to fruition. And a responsibility if it's what you truly want to come out. When you say that people don't really know what they want, and you start by defining like what they don't want, it's just curious to me is if we don't know what we want, we can define what we don't want. Like, how do you ever come to a conclusion on what I want so that you can have the aspirations and you can take the action plan forward to go and do it?
It's a process, and there's a lot of confrontation, internal confrontation that does come up because, again, if you've never been given permission to like answer that question, then you're not going to know how initially.
Yeah. And
there's a lot of, again, we're bumping up against a mechanism that was designed for security and safety. So it is a process.
Yeah.
And, it can be a messy one.
Yes.
An uncomfortable one.
You say messy, but you've worked through all of this stuff in your own life first. Was yours messy to work through?
Actually, so I don't run codependent naturally because I was the scapegoat and the truth teller. So I wasn't trying to people please growing up. I was trying to call everybody out and getting in trouble for it. And that's my personality still to this day. But what I found was that when I got into teaching and coaching, my clientele were all just codependent. And so I learned through my practice, and then I had to even lean on my mentor, even though she wasn't my therapist anymore. I was like, Cheryl, I need help. Like, what is this? You know what I mean? So there was a lot of, like, she had to break down a lot of stuff for me, just so like I could identify it, like confusion, right? Yeah. So there was a lot of work that I had to do to even understand what I was dealing with when I first started working with codependence. So,
yeah, I think it's extremely interesting. Because there's the whole medical side of this, and you were being mentored by a therapist who had that medical training. You're at a point that you've worked with hundreds of people now and seen it. So I'll take you over anyone coming out of school today to go and be a therapist or has this medical degree that goes into it too. But once we get to the point that we know what we want and we're going after it and we've manifested it and we're taking action, what are those final steps of maintenance to achieve living the life that you want to live?
Well, I should probably burst your bubble a little bit and inform you that most people who are after that thing are actually after an internal feeling.
That's interesting. Okay.
So they're like, oh, if I make $1 billion, then I'll feel.
Yes.
Or then I'll be. And then they get there and it's vacuous, right?
Okay, so I fall in this camp. Because I'm on the record with a lot of people, family, friends, people I don't even know, saying, I want to be a billionaire. You're saying that's maybe not exactly what I'm looking for.
Well, then I would ask you, like, what's behind that? Why do you want to be a billionaire? What would it bring you that you don't have now, right?
It's easy to look at the financial side of it. And we get very materialistic very quickly once you do that. But I'm not intrinsically materialistic. I don't really wear nice watches. I drive a Tesla. I like the self-driving technology, but I don't really drive nice cars. I don't live in a monster house. you know? So very practical in that sense. But there is this desire, and maybe it's the power that comes along with it, the respect that comes along with it, but I guess kind of internal issues that we're trying to go at, not so much the
No,
money itself.
absolutely. I mean, people are looking for mostly the same things. They want freedom to be themselves. They want to feel stable and peaceful inside. They want to feel in control of their lives. So people really, when you boil it down, all kind of want the same thing. And if they're still chasing something, then they're not really ready to do deeper work.
Okay.
You know, if they're really just like, no, I want girls and cars. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
come back in 10 years, you know?
Yeah. But do you get people like that?
No, not myself really, but
Okay.
but obviously I've witnessed some of these conversations. Most people who come to me they're a little bit more holistic in their goals.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
you know, again, it's like I had a friend, and I'm not friends with her anymore because there was such a disconnect between us, and she was like, no, achieving is my highest value. And after I achieve this next thing, then. And I'm like, no, you're addicted to achievement. It's not a value. And she's like, no, but I really want to get to a point in my corporation where like I can completely influence. And I was like, you have influence now. You don't want influence. You want control. Like, you know, and there was just a lot of pushback from her about that. But it was like, what you want is not actually in line with the actions that you're taking. You know, why do you want control? Why do you care what your superiors think about you?
Sure.
Who are they to you that this would even matter? What is going on internally that this is the message, right? And she would say things like, "Oh, well, you know, I don't have a problem speaking, so I'm not vulnerable." And I go, "What is your biggest fear?" And she was like, "That I'm stupid." And I go, "Okay, you're stupid." And then she just felt uncomfortable, and I'm like, yeah, see, so there's a piece there. Like she kept trying to come off like I'm not vulnerable, like
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, and it was like, no, like you're so vulnerable, like you're all projection, you know. So there have been some conversations like that, but like, and they don't want to change. They're not ready. They haven't been humbled enough by life to be like, this isn't working. Let's try another way.
Sure.
You know. But like I said, most people who I end up working with, they are looking for the experience or looking for that feeling in their body. They want to be perceived differently and they want to show up differently. And so they do initially, they're like, I want to make a lot of money or whatever. But then when we crack it, they're like, oh, they kind of understand that like, actually, I just want to be able to like say how I feel without pushback.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I want to feel safe. I want to, you know, it's very basic. The things that people really want. It's like I said, freedom. They want to feel in control of their own lives. They want to be able to be more authentic without it being a problem.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
How much of it is people searching for, I just want to have a purpose?
I don't know that I come across that one specifically. I would say more so feeling lost or lost purpose as opposed to trying to find purpose.
Okay.
So it's like, yeah, I felt like I knew what I had going on and now I'm lost. And like I said, I'm 43 now and I have practiced astrology since 2009. So for those who like it, I do apply the astrology because when you get to 37 to like 45, there's a handful of midlife crisis transits and they tend to make everybody go through all of that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
How old are you?
I am 35.
Okay, so you're almost there.
Yes. I in many
call me back
senses, I
when
could
you hit
see
it.
that it is a stage of life with businesses, young kids, the way life kind of comes at you fast. It's funny that you get out of your 20s and all of a sudden it's like, bam.
No, and you really do think you're on top of the world. And then like that late 30s, early 40s kicks in and it is hard and it is humbling.
Yes. Yes.
And what I tell people is because a lot of times that like 40 is like the deadline where people are like, well, they spend their 30s bargaining. Well, I still have until I'm 40 to make the money or get married or do these things. And then 40 sits in as this reality check like, well, that's done and over with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's so uncomfortable. But really the midlife crisis transits, they pull up the lies we told ourselves, the old security and safety crap that we leaned on. That's a really ripe time to revisit all of that because there's no choice.
Yeah.
It is so uncomfortable. All of those things are coming up to reconcile, reflect, and decide, like, okay, where I'm at now, did it work, and do I want to continue?
Yeah. I'm terrified of turning 40, I think because of that. It's approaching for the first time. Hey, my life is probably half over. Like,
It's the midway point, statistically, most people live to be about 78. So it's the midway point,
yeah.
People think midlife is 50. It's not, it's 40.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I think when you're young, you always have the excuse of, I got my whole life ahead of me. Right. You start approaching 40, and I've thought about this, and I had a good friend of mine who just turned 40, who went on a long hike, and we talked deeply about, okay, it's the time to challenge. Is life going the way I wanted it to go? And the self-responsibility at that point is almost unavoidable, because you can look at the actions and decisions that you made and then reflect on, how did this play out a decade later?
Well, and of all the peers that I interviewed, I literally, when I was going through it, I was like, I'm just going to talk to all my girlfriends and find out, like, are you happy? Did it work? What's it like? I interviewed. I was like, and even the ones who got exactly what they wanted, they're like, this is not what I thought it was going to be.
I want to ask that question. When you polled everyone, happiness. Was anybody happy?
And I mean, I wouldn't say happy or unhappy. It was more just like, this didn't work, right? So like women who got married but were getting divorced, well, that didn't work. Or, because I didn't get married or have kids. And so for me, it was like, oh, should I have done that? And then, but after I interviewed all my friends and really did the research, I was like, I think I dodged a bullet.
I can't disagree with you.
I think I may have dodged a bullet, actually. Like, I don't know. Like, that whole fantasy that was projected on me my whole life, it's not looking so romantic anymore.
Yeah.
And then, like, I always think about my one girlfriend who does have a great relationship with her husband, and she's got 4 daughters. And I was like, I'll ask her, how are you doing? Can't even begin to think about me.
Yeah. After working with so many people, what does a happy relationship look like 20 years in? What does a good relationship look like 20 years in? Let's take the word happy out of it.
I say functional relationship, maybe, where both parties are doing their part. I think there's few and far in between, though, of those relationships. My therapist taught me a long time ago, she goes, most people do not choose their person, they choose their pattern. And they kind of get locked in that until one person doesn't want to do the pattern anymore. And that's where it shifts. But they get set up based on that patterning that I kind of explained in the beginning. And so that's a great question. I maybe I'll get back to you when I meet a couple that I'm like really impressed by.
Yeah. Have we always been this way? Well, I feel like previous generations, I remember people from the greatest generation and great grandparents now who seemed like they were very happily married, 50, 60 years in, wild about each other. What did they have figured out that all generations since don't know about?
See, and that's where I would challenge that and go, but were they? Now, the couples that I've seen that work the best have the same value system. A lot of them are based in religion. But if you really get underneath there, are they coping with each other, or are they using their religion as the buffer? That happens a lot. I was raised Mormon, so I see that a lot.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, let's just read our scriptures. So they're not really dealing with the issues at hand. They're kind of buffering with their religion instead. Does that make sense?
It actually kind of hits home for me, because I used to ask the question to people, show me the happily married couple 30 years in. I've had to put a caveat to that, or an asterisk, and say, show me the happily married couple that isn't a part of like a cult that's happily married. Because you can find a lot of really happy looking people where it's forced submission of the wife to the husband because God said so. So you have
100%.
to. I don't care what you have to say because this is, well, anyone can look happy in that instance where there's only one person that gets a voice, right?
100%.
But I think you're dead on. Like the religion is a huge aspect to that because God said someone
Right.
has
It's
to do
really
something.
easy to deflect.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'd be like, well, if you eliminate those people, which is most of, historically, they were more religious, you know, and then if you interview, like if I really were to talk to my grandmother who passed away at 95, you know, she would tell me, no, I've been married 4 times and they were abusive relationships. Women back in the 50s actually took antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications. They were medicated. So we have this perception of history, but I don't know that it reflects the reality.
That's interesting. It could be my flawed experience thinking back to the couples that I knew. And it just seemed like you had these old men that were just wild about their wives. And, you know.
But was she wild about him?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
I have seen so many old ladies that once he dies, she's like, it's so great.
Really?
Yes, and she's so happy that like she doesn't have to worry about him anymore, you know, because she was just his nurse in the end.
Yeah.
So the men, okay, yeah, if they're being catered to, but I don't know about the women and if they were that happy, right?
So this has been a system that is, especially a system of suppression. I mean, it's not that long ago that women couldn't vote.
Right.
So like we're not that far removed from that.
It wasn't that long ago. It was just the 90s where it was legal to rape your wife.
I mean, this is like 30 years ago. I talk about this sometimes with people. We get talking about race issues too and say, let's not forget that like 70 years ago, this was a very different country to be living in than we are. So much progress has been made. It seems to me, I find a little striking when I ask you about the people who have been liberated of sense by social norms changing. Where is there room for women to speak out about a woman's role in the home and trying to get us back to where things were 50 years ago? I can see why some men would have a problem with it based on where they were at the time. Why do you see young women speaking out? And I'm not saying there's a lot of them.
And wanting to have
some.
a more traditional.
Looking for the more traditional and not wanting to have that their voice be heard. Why would that be?
Well, I think part of that has to do with the fact that like every culture has a counterculture, and then we also have every generation kind of resisting the last generation. So we've had a huge wave of feminism coming up, right, since the 60s, which, from my understanding, because I didn't know this until recently, but I guess feminism was originally pushed not because women wanted to leave the home, but because they wanted their labor appreciated in the home. They wanted it recognized. So that was part of it. Where it's come, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things. Like, again, I've always had male business partners. There's not a single thing I have set out to do that I've been blocked by as a woman. So there's a little bit of the narrative right now where it's like, we're still being suppressed. And I'm like, speak for yourself, girl, because I'm not. You know what I mean? Like, and I live in Nevada, and we voted for abortion on the Constitution. Like, so I can't get on your bandwagon with everything. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Because I'm not experiencing that. But I think
But you see some of it there, at least different opportunities for women. Like Ricky's behind the camera. We were talking earlier today about at her age, 26, that's the child rearing years, getting married. As far as employers are concerned, you look at someone like that as a bit of a risk, right? Because you might opt to just leave the workplace for 10 years and then come back. Even if that's not going to happen, there's always this thought in the back of someone's mind of, okay, but you may just want to go be a mom for a bit. You may just want to go be a stay-at-home mom for a bit. That, I would think, guy's perspective has an impact on opportunity, whether or not it's a woman's intention to climb corporate ladder versus just have a family versus do both. Do you disagree with that?
No, I think that that's probably a very real, like, paradigm that exists, especially in the corporate world. There's a lot of paradigms that exist in the corporate world that I'm not a fan of.
Yeah.
I've always worked for myself for the most part. But I mean, back to what we were talking earlier there, I do think that like the younger Gen Z and Gen Alpha are pushing back against that just because it's what the generations do. They just counter the last generation, right? So we also see that younger men are becoming more conservative at a faster rate than they were other generations.
Sure.
So there's a lot of shifting, but I think it's just to balance the extremes. I don't know if it's right or wrong. It's just the nature of things. This is going too far in this direction. Let's pull it back. Let's push for this now. So, I mean, my complaint is around men who think that women just need to continue to do this gymnastics around them and they don't have to change at all. Like, that's my complaint. I'm really tired of a lot of these old paradigms not shifting in terms of men carrying their weight, men bearing the labor, emotionally in the home and stuff like that. Like, it's like that I can see why my friends are so exhausted because they don't have the support.
Yeah.
So that's my personal complaint. I don't know if it'll be different for those young couples, if the kids will grow up with a more of a legitimate partnership paradigm going in, or if they're going to push for that traditional. Like, no, I mean, I do see some of that on TikTok where girls are like bragging and wanting to be trad wives.
Yeah.
And then the older women are like, no, honey, you don't want to be a trad wife. Like, trust me, you don't. And in hindsight, like looking back, I wouldn't have wanted that either, simply because I just have too much energy. It would have been trying to put me in a box and trying to get me to sit still.
Yeah. Leaning on your experience, you talk about all of your friends that you've heard, but so many of the women that you've worked with. We've done a lot of talking about and at women on this talk. Let's talk about men for just a couple of minutes here. Can you describe for me, from your experience working with people, what the perfect guy would have in a very general sense, different for every single couple, but you've heard the pain points that women have, the lack of support emotionally and carrying too much of the burden. Can you describe for me what the perfect guy would be doing, just so we can get an idea, generally speaking, of what would fill most of the needs for most of these women?
So I think one of the big paradoxes is, men like to claim they're leaders, but then they take no lead, right? So women, they want a man who just initiates and takes the lead. What does that look like? Don't make me choose where to go for dinner. Don't ask me to tell you how to clean the house or do laundry or pick up things. Because men will be like, well, if she just tells me, I'll do it. Well, we don't want to have to. We want a self-starter. Like, if you lived alone, would your house be a mess? Would your laundry never be done? Like, what are those things that you would do to take care of yourself? And who knows, maybe you'd be hiring out a maid and you'd be doing none of it. But we want more of that, like taking stuff off of our plate without having to push it off or tell you to do it.
Sure.
So it's a lot of those complaints. I'm a little bit more of a commitment avoidant person by nature.
Okay.
I've never been one that like had to have a boyfriend. I've
Yeah.
really enjoyed my independence over the years. So as soon as I see it trending in a direction I don't want, I'm usually out.
Okay.
I find myself buried long term, like with really crappy relationships. When I was younger, I went back and forth with a guy for 8 years.
Okay.
But it was too young to really even measure these things. We didn't
Sure.
get married. We didn't have kids. You know what I mean? But like, so from what I understand about my peers, what my family, what they've gone through, because I haven't had firsthand experience with that complaint.
Yeah.
I've just watched them. But the thing that, and this man will be like, women do this too. I'm sure they do. The inability to sit with a complaint or like a, hey, can we talk about this? I don't like that you did this. So it's the deflection. And when you constantly deflect from something, you create distance, and then men wonder why she just wanted out at a certain point, but he didn't see where she was trying to connect and he kept shutting her down.
Sure.
Over time, like, she made the complaint. She wasn't a nag, but she came across as a nag to you, and now she doesn't want to do it anymore, and she's out.
Yeah.
So, I guess someone who's willing to listen and be empathetic. And men have this idea that, like, if they go to therapy, they're weak. That's not true at all. If they listen or practice empathy or compassion, that they're weak. Or that if they cry, they're weak. That is not true at all. What a healthy woman is going to call weakness is avoidance, deflection, the shutting down, the running away, the not dealing with something, pushing it off. Like, these are behaviors that we're like, okay, you're a weak man. That is not a strength. That is grotesque. Someone who leans in, listens, looks for solutions, takes the lead when you say you have a problem. That is a man.
Is that the emotional support you're talking about by doing those things?
Yeah.
How is it, how do you think through and break down the desire for acknowledgement of how much the woman is doing versus the I need you to help out? I'm talking about now the heavy burden, the kids, the laundry, the dishes, the things around the house. Is it more about acknowledgement or a genuine cry for, like, no, I need help. Like, we both need to contribute to this.
Genuinely needing that contribution. The acknowledgement's really not enough. Like, it's a good start, but it's not enough. Like, someone who's like, I got you, we'll take care of it.
Yeah.
Men don't like to hear women, like, this is where women need to just lean on their girlfriends a little more. Women like to just talk and spew their problems, not because they're looking for a solution, but because they have to get it off their chest. Men are going to always seek to fix it immediately, and there's friction there.
Yeah.
So, like, if I just want to, like, totally just be like, can you believe this happened today? I'm not going to go to a man with that. I'm going to go to my girlfriend with that. I'm going to go to my girlfriend with that. You know what I mean? And we'll both just jump in for hours and dissect it. You know what I mean? But, like, a guy is just, like, I recently had the opportunity to work with, because I got back into speaking, and it was like a male speaking coach or a female speaking coach. And the male, when I would try to express how I was feeling, they kept trying to redirect it to like a logistical, pragmatic solution. And I was just like, ugh. I felt so unheard and so shut down. And I was like, no, I'm definitely not working with a man.
Yeah. I'm guilty of all of the above. And every other man that I know is too. Even the ones that are more in tune with the emotional side. Sometimes the easy thing for a group of guys to come to a conclusion at a golf trip is, there's just no way to make them happy, But you're saying there is a way. And it requires change on our part. Lift the finger more, be more emotionally supportive.
Be more proactive.
Be more proactive.
Don't wait for her to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
Like, what were the last 10 things she assigned to you? And just do them. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I think I kind of fall in that camp sometimes of, and probably a lot of guys, hey, I'm willing to help. I want to help. Tell me what to do. And you see how diametrically
and me telling you what
opposed.
To do is one more thing for me to do.
Emotional labor.
Yeah.
The emotional labor.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me because it seems like while men and women were made for each other, we weren't really made for each other.
I know.
We don't really mesh all that well. For us to say what we want and actually receive it seems so simple. What I find interesting is that you get a group of guys and girls together who are not dating, who are not married to each other, who don't have all the baggage that comes with it. The way that they can talk so openly and resolve things versus you get inside the confines of a relationship and you just kind of stop talking at some point.
All of your childhood wounding just comes right up.
Yeah.
All of it. And you have to just be objective. It's so uncomfortable, but you have to remind yourself, like, this person in front of me wasn't the original perpetrator. Even though I feel really, burdened by what they've done or whatever, they're not the original event. This pain existed inside me prior to them showing up. They're just a reminder that I need to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's why relationships are so difficult. We become so fragile. And again, we go back to our corners with our pre-existing bullshit patterns, because we cripple. Our nervous system takes over. We're uncomfortable. We just shut down, whatever it may be, or we overreact and yell and scream. So yeah.
We could have an altar call after that talk right there, and I would definitely come forward. I have your book here. Is there anything that you'd like to state? This is Leading the Intentional Life, which I just finished this morning, and it's such a good read, a convicting read at that. Anything you want to say about your book, your reset program, as we kind of conclude things here, that you'd like people to know about Paige Elizabeth?
So as far as my book, like I actually have to give a lot of credit to my ghostwriter. So it's her voice and my voice in there. And I will say, like, this is still, I think, my biggest testimonial to date. My ghostwriter was in a very physically abusive relationship at the time we started writing. And she left for that relationship in the middle of writing this book because she felt like such a fraud. So, like, still to this day, I think that was probably my best, because she was like, I just couldn't keep writing your book and stay. Like, he broke her wrist. He was doing all kinds of bad stuff.
Wow.
He was awful. So, you know, I want to share that, because there's a life behind the book too. And then my reset program is definitely, you know, like it's full body, mind, spirit, everything for women over 35, so that they have a place that they can come home to. You know, have a whole community actually, and it's to learn to use your voice, to learn to set boundaries, and to reset. There's a lot of stuff that happens over 35. Our immune system doesn't modulate as well. Cortisol starts to run the show. You end up with cortisol stealing your sex hormones. A lot of women think they're in perimenopause. They're not. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and we really help them recalibrate all of that so that they can literally learn to move forward and lead with permission and ease. So, you know, leadership is a feminine default, and it's not something that we need permission for. It's something that, like, we just need to show up and do. So that's what my program is about, and I'm really passionate about that. You know, anything that I teach, I also practice. So
Yeah.
I'm very integrated in that way.
That one thing I've heard you say time and time again today is they're probably waiting for permission.
Oh,
probably
gosh.
asking for permission. And I think that you're such a great example of that in the way that you're putting yourself out there and saying, hey, don't ask for permission. Just do it. Just do it.
And I will just say this on a final note. So I was assaulted in 2019 by a man I had known 15 years. We were not romantic. And it turned into, you know, litigation, and they'd countersued, trying to shut me up and shut me down. And I just got louder. And it was advised by a friend of mine who was an attorney, and he said, you know, just be careful what you post, because they'll try to use it against you. And I went into a 5-hour deposition where I had to account for whatever they wanted to bring up. And I mean, he brought up a picture of me and my cat and said, does she look normal? And in that moment, I realized, I was like, it really just does not matter. Like, if you, like, how you show up, people are going to find a reason to bring you down.
Yeah.
Me and my cat, really? like, of all the things that you could bring up and make us waste our time on, it's a picture of me and my cat.
Yeah.
And, you know, in that moment, like, there was a couple of moments in that deposition, and one of the things he said was, you know, oh, you told the psychiatrist that you didn't like me, but before today, have we ever met? Did I do something to you? And I said, the guy sitting next to you defaulted on our business, left me hanging with the bag years ago. Then he assaulted me. Then he countersued. And you're the guy representing him. Why would I like you? And my attorney started giggling. He goes, I don't think it's personal.
How did he respond?
He just kind of shut down. And at one point he tried to call me hostile. He's like, your client is acting hostile. And I said, if you think this is hostile, you should have been there the night your client beat me up. So I've just learned, it's like people are going to try to find a way, whether you use your voice or not. So you might as well use it
Yeah.
and at least heal in the process.
Yeah.
I mean, I left that day feeling like I was questioned for my humanity. Ultimately, we prevailed and he settled and whatever. But it's like, my point is just that you don't need permission. You know, and that pushback. Will there be pushback? Well, a dog will get abused for being loyal just as much as someone will be targeted for, being confrontational. So it's not like you can avoid the resistance. It's just, do you want to be integrated and healed and authentic and showing up, or do you want to be sacrificing your voice and creating inner friction and, setting yourself up for autoimmune disorders and still not getting what you want?
Yeah.
Like, which path? You know what I mean? I'm not saying that by standing up for yourself that it's easy, but there's a reward,
Yeah.
You can choose, the saying, choose your heart. It's like, we can have consequences or we can have results. Which one do you want?
It's a powerful message.
So,
And I think something that we didn't touch on today that we'll have to talk about next time is this whole idea of burnout from the inauthenticity and having to hold something inside for so long that it eventually kind of bubbles over and explodes. I just appreciate you sharing that with us. And I think that there's so much that men and women can learn from that experience and the things we talked about here today. So thanks for doing it. I appreciate it. And we'll have to do it again soon.
it was great being here.
Absolutely.